welcome to Catalyst Conversations. Here we are with Fernando Galvez's main catalysts. I'm Carolina, the creative director. We have Hansel, Fern, and Ben. And today we're going to be talking about all things newsjacking in the media. So, whether you're a girly pop like me or you're more into AI, strategy, Wimbledon, we're going to be talking about all the things that brands are doing to stay relevant online. First things first, I'm on Love Island TikTok. I am all over it. I am watching every single night. I'm voting on the app. I'm keeping tabs on who's in and who's out. And something that I've realized a lot of brands doing is injecting themselves into the conversation by either picking teams, picking couples, and saying how they're going to collaborate with these people once they're out of the villa. So I'm guessing nobody here watches Love Island.
I cannot say I do.
Not the demographic.
You know, I understand you're not the target demographic, and I wasn't really holding my breath for it, but you guys are really great marketers, and you're going to appreciate what companies like JetBlue or Poppy are doing for the Islanders. So something that I recently saw a couple of days ago was JetBlue posting a TikTok saying how immediately when Amaya, which is one of the Islanders, is out of the villa, that they're going to get her on whatever flight that she wants to be on. And they literally took out a whole jet just for her for a TikTok. We have other brands like Poppy Soda saying how they're going to name an entire new drink after her called Amaya Papaya. And these
Amaya
are just...
Papaya.
Yes, and this is just a taste of what brands are doing, especially for such a big show like Love Island. But we also saw it this weekend with Wimbledon. I know, Fern, you had told me about that. So what happened there with the newsjacking?
Well, it's an opportunity. So, I mean, in the same essence that all of these things are happening with Love Island and brands are finding opportunities to inject themselves into what's going on culturally across different platforms and how people are communicating and what our consumers are finding interesting. During Wimbledon, one of the American stars, Ben Shelton, was doing his post-game interview. He had just won. He made it to the round of 16s. And he said his sister was visiting him or watching him while he was going through the tournament, and that was his lucky charm. And he shouted out a company, Morgan Stanley, which is not a sponsor. So the guy interviewing was like, hey, what are you doing? But the relevance was that
that was planned. He got paid on the side.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe, who knows? But his sister works for Morgan Stanley, and he was like, if anybody has some connects, right, reach out to Morgan Stanley. Maybe she could get a few more days off, so that she could watch him. So obviously somebody at Morgan Stanley took notice, and she actually got the week off, so she could stay there. But the press that Morgan Stanley got from that opportunity, just injecting themselves into the conversation and becoming the hero of that story, right? Something that they took advantage of. So that they were all over the news. People are talking about it. People are reposting it. Associated Press wrote an article about it. So in the same essence of what you're talking about, brands are, and this obviously has happened throughout time, but now it just becomes something you can react to, become part of the conversation. Now, Morgan Stanley is in the same conversation as Wimbledon. I mean, it was a golden opportunity for them.
But how do brands react to that, right? Where do they see the opportunity, and what does it really take to react so quickly that it actually makes an impact?
I guess it would just have to be relevant, something that's, first of all, it has to be some, I would think, a different perspective or something that makes sense and that people find relevant to what is happening. I mean, we've done it in the past internally ourselves. I'm sorry?
It needs to make sense for the brand.
Yeah.
Also, because there are certain brands that they don't make sense talking about Love Island or Wimbledon or anything else that's going on. So yeah, I think that's number one. Makes sense for the brand, their tone, their personality. And Hansel, I know that you're also chronically online like all of us. Um, so I would love to see like what have you seen when it comes to newsjacking, or any opportunities that you recommend for brands to get into.
I mean, to me, I think I know that the term newsjacking is something that we're using, but to me, how this is just the new way, I guess the refresh version of kind of being in culture, right? Like what I think what we used to call this was how are we culturally relevant, right? So I think that we've seen brands doing this or trying to do this for as long as marketing's been around. I think that originally, I think even the rise of influencers was just kind of in that same vein of how do we stay in culture, how do we stay relevant, what's new, having those kind of sponsors, if you will, of influencers activating. I think that what you're seeing now, which is different, is that things like in everything in media, it just moves a lot faster. So a brand like Goldman Sachs, for example, to use that example, someone has to be chronically online, right? Their social media team has to be plugged in for every single mention to be able to turn that around. Because if they would have waited till, 3 days later, the moment would have been gone, and it could have easily just been negative press for oh, they never responded, that's why we don't work for so I think
Yeah,
that
exactly.
brands have to be more than ever just dialed into their audience. The social media manager needs to be part of kind of the conversation. They need to have a way to reach the decision makers on, decisions like, hey, can we extend, so and so's vacation for a week, or can I tag a brand and make this comment and, go back and forth. Like, we need to be able to provide kind of more autonomy for that social team to be plugged in every piece of the business, because I think time is of the essence, and it can be really unforgiving, because if you're late, it can turn easily from a positive to a negative very quickly.
And it's interesting that you said social, right? Because the reality is that these are not specifically social events, right? You have a TV show, you have a sports show, and sometimes it's news related. And I know Fern was going to mention it. We didn't consider newsjacking at the time. We were trying to help our brand, right? So we did a campaign with Fuzzy Vodka where, when Russia initially invaded Ukraine, they were tossing vodka out on the street. I mean, it was literally bars pouring vodka out on the street.
Like Russian
And
vodka.
Fuzzy's was an American made vodka, and had nothing to do with Russia. And we wanted to address that in some fashion, right? So to your point, Hansel, it's something that has to be done quickly. It's very reactive. I remember we got on a call with the Fuzzy team, and we're like, hey, listen, it was a Saturday. I think it was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. All of these things were happening, and we saw it on social. I mean, that's the reality. We saw these things happening on social. We weren't tuned into the news, but that front line of social integration is important, because when we saw it, we said, we have to get in front of this. And that's exactly what we did. We came up with a script. We pitched them an idea of essentially banning the Moscow Mule and coming out with the American Stallion. And it took off. But we shot it on Monday. We put it out on Tuesday. Press picked it up. USA Today, Atlanta Journal, Fox Business. It was literally everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think that's a key component of it. It's just being very fast, very reactive, and making sure that it's relevant to the product and the brand in itself.
Yeah. And I don't know if you guys remember, and the fruition of that idea was because there were all these announcements to deter Russia from continuing or their invasion, like a sanction on this and financial sanctions on that. And these people are boycotting anything Russian. And so like Ben mentioned, we realized that people were pouring Russian vodka from bars, and we kind of, in a way, wanted to join that conversation, and that's why the story picked up everywhere, and it had people talking about it, and people were, it's kind of like all the ramifications of something that's happening in the world, and being part of that conversation. Was it a risk? Of course, sometimes brands, like, and that's, I guess, to Carolina's point, like, when is it appropriate? Are you willing to take a risk? Is our brand edgy that way? Is it more willing to push the envelope and kind of do that, or is it more like your audience, how are they going to feel? And we felt that risk and that idea was within the brand and the way we wanted to be perceived, and the way that our our consumers felt comfortable in us acting.
Yeah.
And
also, go ahead.
Go ahead, Caro.
Oh, I was just gonna add on to that a little bit in the sense of you also have to have a lot of trust in your marketing agency and have clients that are very receptive to these ideas that are catalysts. And I know that that's part of the story of American Stallion, how you guys called the brand on a Saturday telling them this idea and they fully trusted you.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say. I was going to ask, like, Fern and Ben, like, do you think this works without the client being bought in and being that flexible also from an agency perspective?
No,
there's no way. I mean, brands have to be, like Gato said, brands definitely have to trust their agencies or even their internal marketing departments, whoever's in marketing. I mean, you need to empower them and give them enough support to try those ideas and be something that is going to challenge the status quo. The biggest problem is there's a lot of worry about brand safety, about playing it safe, not pissing off the masses. But the reality is that sometimes it's so relevant and so parallel to the brand in itself that it makes that impact. And that's really what brands need. If you want to stay top of mind, if you want to be culturally relevant, if you want a newsjack, it has to be in parallel with what your audience aligns in you, and that's a values thing. That's where connection comes in. That's where the customer journey comes in, and you're really trying to align not only the messaging with the consumer, but making sure that you're aligning with those same values that they share. And that's what builds brand advocacy later on.
So, I think you mentioned something about being aligned to your customer and the customer journey, because I think this, something to distinguish here is the word social, right? Because social in two respects, we're talking about social media, but also just the social conversation, right? The zeitgeist, right?
Yeah.
And I think both are important. Social media is important in this channel because that is the closest medium to boots on the ground to what the conversation is amongst the population. Tomorrow, for whatever reason, there's a new kind of community forum, then we would go there. So I think social media is the channel by which we can see and be part of the conversation that's happening. And what we really want to be a part is leveraging the channel to be part of the conversation, right? Because when you look at the life cycle of a news story, you have breaking news, then you have kind of the media, once something like that, breaks, scrambling for more information.
Yeah.
Then public excitement increases, it kind of crescendos in the peak and then starts to go down, old news, etc. When you're doing newsjacking, you really want to be in that very specific space between breaking news and media outlets looking to cover it more, because if you're able to get right before then, what you end up kind of jumping on is the added value of media as they're looking to cover that topic further, is tapping into what you're doing. And now you become part of that story versus, reacting to the story once it was written. It's hard to inject yourself into the conversation unless, again, it's a developing story and there's more to tell. So I think, like, when we talk about Fuzzy, I think that's a great example, because all of a sudden the media outlets wanted to talk more about that as they're looking to how to kind of drive more narrative into that story. Guess what? The activation of the brand helped fuel that kind of conversation along, which then the brand was able to kind of enjoy and kind of take it all the way through.
Yeah, and I would add to that, right? I think that it's important to note the story and the narrative of the brand is aligned with what's happening, but doesn't have to be the same story, right? I mean, in the case of JetBlue, what does that have to really do with Love Island, right? I mean, nothing at all. In the case of Morgan Stanley, it was more of a heartfelt, supportive aspect of, like, we want to support the people that work for us so that they can support their families. It doesn't always have to be directly related to a specific social issue or the topic at hand, or you're not adding to the story, you're becoming part of the community.
Right, but Ben, to your point, it goes back to your customer, right? Like, guess what? JetBlue flyers are likely watching Love Island, right? Wimbledon viewers are likely to be, Morgan Stanley customers, right? So like there's still a consumer connection, even if it's not a contextual connection. You know what I mean?
Well,
I don't know if Ben's sister is in the marketing department at Morgan Stanley. She's probably so.
She was a plant. She was a
that
plant.
would be that would be like
Industry plant.
sponsorship jacking.
I mean, really, like when you think about it, though, right? Because PR is like that third leg of marketing that is so important to the process, hard to quantify sometimes, right? But when it comes to things like this, it's invaluable because you couldn't pay for that kind of cover. I mean, you could, but you need a bankroll essentially to do it.
Right.
And I mean, and it shows you though how times have changed, right? Because a financial institution that, like, when you think of like how they wanna be viewed or whatnot, maybe in the past they would be like, no, she has to come to work. We're responsible. We do everything. Like we have rules and our customer, But now brands, to the new way of doing things, brands are more open to be flexible and to be understanding and understand the perception that everybody's human and everybody wants to have enjoy their time, and people have empathy and want good things to happen.
Yeah.
So that's definitely interesting too to see.
And I wonder also, like, right, so in the Wimbledon is obviously a really big event. It's watched globally. I wonder how that impacts also the other brands, right, that are paying for the sponsorship. Like Stella Artois released one of the most beautiful custom packaging that I've seen by a brand for Wimbledon. Like it was incredible. It's like this white can embossed. It was incredible branding. But that brings just more attention to those types of brands when you have some kind of, integration like Morgan Stanley doing this, massive push and initiative. And it kind of brings Wimbledon to the front of it. And now that engagement causes more, viewership across the whole Wimbledon, arena, right? No pun intended. But
I wonder if they view it that way, because I did see like a recap of that interview, let's say on the Wimbledon TikTok account, and they bleeped the names. Yeah. So I would imagine that if there's a financial institution that's a big sponsor, is spending millions of dollars, they might have not been too happy with that.
Sure.
So
Citibank
I guess that's
pissed.
I was gonna say, like, is this a new? I mean, again, I put quotations on the new, but at the end of the day, it's a different form of guerrilla marketing, right? How do you kind of show up in places? Listen, I'm a runner, and one thing that I always notice is, for example, I'll go and do a marathon at. I think I did a marathon in London, and when the official running partner for that marathon is not Nike, yet Nike's holding Nike run clubs independently. They have loosely tied, Run London kind of gear. So they're obviously feeding off guerrilla style, off of the energy of the runners being in market, even if they're not the sponsor. So like, again, is this another form of guerrilla marketing? I think easily the answer is yes. But I think what I start to think about, and I think this is more for Gato, since I know that she's definitely on the protect the human camp in marketing, is does newsjacking begin to lose effectiveness if you have AI automated to kind of jump on any little thing and cite a comment or generate an image, and you have agents kind of just like literally feeding off of these moments at a moment's notice? Do you think that there's room for that human touch there, or do you think that it starts to erode the effectiveness of this kind of like involvement because a bot did it, right?
Yeah, honestly, I think this protects the community manager's job, because there's no AI bot, in my opinion, that can bring that human aspect and human thought to something like newsjacking, because it takes a lot of culture and a lot of thought and a lot of tying things together that I don't think an AI bot can do. And to add to your point, I think it is like a newer version of guerrilla marketing, but it's also a newer version of just PR as a whole. And again, the definition of PR is a two-way relationship between a brand and its community, and something that a brand like JetBlue or Poppy or Morgan Stanley would have paid thousands and thousands of dollars in retainers over the course of 6 months to a year to get the press that they're getting now, just for simply knowing, or somebody saying, oh, we should talk about this online, or we should talk about this, or we should jump on this organically. I think that's where it's at. So I don't think that AI will take over this one just yet. I have hope in that one, but I definitely think it can aid in it maybe, but it won't take it away.
Well, you know, what I think it would do, in my opinion, is muddle it at the very least. I do agree that there's something human touch of like, you know, just situational awareness of like, hey, you know what, let's give this person the whole week for the, you know, again, go back to the woman example. But like, I do think that at least in the short term, especially when agents come out, it may muddle the waters a little bit. Kind of like the same way that now you can't scroll, you know, past 10, you know, accounts in your feed without having that one AI account pop up of like just a bunch of, you know, AI slop. And it's like, it creates
your For You page. It's not mine. I will say.
Listen, it's, I maybe. It might be me, but I don't know, man. Listen, the other day I was seeing it in my wife was like looking at some like AI like chickens dressed in whatever. I'm like, bro, that's AI. She's like, is it? I was like, yep. I know it looks really real, but like that's AI. And it's like, crap, like I can't trust anything. It's like you can't. All of a sudden you start to question everything, and it just adds doubt. Not that that's a bad thing. You should be skeptical, but like I just think that how much skepticism do you think will grow over time? Where some of these stores you're like, maybe it's cool, but like, maybe it was AI.
You're like aunts or you're like tias, your abuelas being like, oh,
forget about it. They're
careful, be careful, because I saw on Facebook, that this person is out on the streets and they're getting women your age, and I'm like, where did you see that?
No, we're cooked.
Yeah,
this is the new age of like the African prince.
But you know what? You know what's crazy? It's like at least I would say a year ago, you would automatically be able to say, oh, this is AI, this is fake, this is this. Like, and now there's things that I watch and I'm like, I'm not sure. I can't put my finger on it whether if it's real or not. And that's a scary thing, right? So like I can't I'm always like, man, so you just leave it at it, you leave it as I watched something and I cannot confirm or deny, you know. I'm like,
I think what's important to note here, I mean, because AI is always going to be a big conversation of everything, but what brands do at this point and their integration into newsjacking is very different than doing things where it's community involved, right? So when you're creating things because you're trying to think of meme culture, right? You had a bunch of people sitting in a room just creating memes all day. Look at Chipotle's account, right? It's just a meme account. Those things essentially become cultural, not become cultural relevant, but become part of their community that they're trying to align with, versus taking advantage of an opportunity that you got recognition for something that you contributed to. And in this case, Morgan Stanley was just like, hey, they mentioned us. This is an opportunity for us to, you know, give her the week off. You know, JetBlue said, hey, she said something about a plane. Let's give her a plane. You know, so it's those things. And I don't know. I'm just assuming that's why JetBlue got involved.
You get a plane. You get a plane. You get a plane.
Why?
Because she was okay. Amaya, which is who everyone's supporting, she's like the nicest girl in the villa.
Yeah.
Right? She's the nicest girl in the villa.
We're all in.
And they were being really mean to her, and there were other people that were like not so nice. There were bullies. So everybody was like, oh, I fully support Amaya. So brands from everywhere were like, Amaya's the best, Amaya this, Amaya that. And then JetBlue was like, oh, going to support my girl Amaya. And the plane was literally coming out like as if it was gonna fly to go support her. It was crazy.
You know, but let me just add something here, right? Like, it's also important to understand that, yes, the context of the show, why they got involved, but I think that what JetBlue did well there was that JetBlue identified the fact that it was a cultural moment. Like I've seen videos of people at sports bars literally live viewing the show. So all of a sudden, it is a phenomenon. It's happening. The community, everyone is talking about it, and now you're able to jump in. But because if it was a super niche like show that like it's only targeted a small subsection of the community, would it be worth it? Yes, but maybe to a smaller degree, because your overall reach or impact is going to be diluted because it's not the show that everyone's talking in the water cooler, right? So I think it's like, how do you find the right balance of audience, tactic, and then also taking advantage of a moment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what
And what do you
newsjacking
do?
is
What do
at
you
the
do
end of
when
the
the
day.
brand doesn't want to align?
Yeah.
Oof.
That's the agency's biggest. We always say, like, you know how many ideas we can resurrect from the graveyard? That would be insane, because
Well,
all we do is pitch all day, right? So you have got over here talking about, let's do Love Island personalities with puppies for Petland, and they're like, hell yeah, we're all in on it, let's do it, and they did it. And then at the same time, we can pitch Love Island to another client that maybe is just not so keen on it because they're not a fan of the show, right? So
yeah,
I
that's a
think it
tough
comes
one.
back to what
It's an
Hansel was
audience
saying, like
thing.
whether they perceive that their audience is watching it or not, and they find it relevant, right? So since Padland is more like consumer wide, families, this, that, the other, they tend to, their consumers tend to be more on that side of culture. While if it was like a B2B company that's selling,
Listen,
office supplies or something, or I don't know. My point is,
listen.
it
What I
depends
would
on the
say
audience.
what I would say to Fern's idea of like being able to have those conversations with the client, depending on what they are, I think that has to do with how you view yourself, how your agency, right? Or your brand for that matter. But let's say from an agency perspective, how you view yourself in your job as an agency. I think ultimately the idea is to be proactive, is to drive education as experts in the field, right?
Yeah,
As a brand, if you have an agency, is to be able to be receptive to that. If you have an in-house team, is to be receptive to that in-house team. So I
yeah,
think that if you're in the camp of wanting to do these ideas, and whether it be agency brand or internal team to brand, and having that kind of decision maker not be on the fence, I think that's where you take a longer tail approach and say, okay, how can I start bringing in information, education on top of the stuff that you're already doing to drive that relationship of, look, this is information. I'm driving, some insights into what's happening. Let's get some testing done and kind of slow work it. Again, some of the stuff you have to be day of, you have to react quickly, but maybe some other longer trends, maybe it's Love Island, now it's a cultural moment, next season might be something that more people jump in on. So how do you start setting up the play and say, look, this is why I think we should maybe get involved with next year and see how it plays, and start getting that trust where you get to kind of a shorter and shorter, let's call it, approved window to react and approve and move within over time. But yeah, that's a tough one, Ben, for sure.
yeah.
And, as we wrap up on this topic, I kind of wanted to ask each of you, based on your experience and expertise, what's one piece of advice that you would give a brand when it comes to newsjacking? So I'll start with Ben.
React, be
Put on
fast,
the
don't
spot.
wait. Get the idea out there quick.
yeah. I would say that find something that's relevant to you that makes sense to incorporate into the cultural moment so that it has an impact.
Yeah, and
Yep.
to me, it kind of goes a little bit on Fern's thread, which is take the time to really know your audience. Um, I think that you really need to have a solid understanding of who your consumers are, what they like, what they do outside of your brand, to be able to kind of connect them, because this is not this is kind of like a not a direct sale of the brand or the product. It's something more kind of subtle, right? So understanding who they are is really going to help you kind of align as to where you need to be, and what kind of stories or news is you need to be paying attention to.
Awesome.
And, I think I would say to trust their marketing agency wholeheartedly. And then to the marketing agency, I would say trust your Gen Z employees who are chronically online, who understand the culture, and maybe if it's not something that you understand, cough, cough, Ben,
Oh man,
it
that's
might
some
still be
shade
relevant.
right there.
Listen, you're gonna have to break down the Love Island thing to me. I still don't get it.
He doesn't get the lore.
He doesn't get the lore.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right, guys. That was a really great conversation. And, before we go, we are going to be showing you the JetBlue TikTok that we have been mentioning for the past 40 minutes, the one that we've talked about 15 times. So take it away.
Yeah.